Thank you very much for coming to what's now the fourth in our Open University series. Apologies for a slightly later start, but a few technical problems which were unexpected. We have a very tight lockdown now in the civil service computers, and it doesn't always work with us as well as we'd like. For those of you who thought we were going to be listening to Talking Crime, we've swapped the crime seminar for families, but I think everybody was emailed. So, no? Okay. But I can tell you that, well, our speaker in crime had an unexpected illness.
Yeah, he had an operation on his foot and he lives in Cork and he couldn't drive for a week. So he was sort of stuck. So I'm sorry, we have to swap around. So
we are swapping the religion one for the crime one. Now I have to say the crime one is equally as good as the families one. The religion one is as equally as good. I'm not saying not better, but that's a talk after work understanding. So I encourage you to come back for crime next month. I apologise if anybody's disappointed, but I can assure you that this is my standing talk. Okay, which Janice is left with the breach to deliver. Very late notice. You all have facts. I'll just pass you now on to Janice. Thank you very much.
As I'm really sorry if you were expecting crime, and Barry had talked to me before he had found out about his little op, and had said that he'd found an infanticide in Kilwater, and he was all very excited about that. And the two of us then got very excited until I realized, well, that it might not have been so nice for either the mum or the baby concerned, but that, you know, in true historians fashion, we'd kind of forgotten about the people involved. So hopefully, if you do come back next month, you'll hear a bit more about that case and about crime in general in the north of Ireland. So I hope nobody's too disappointed that tonight I'll be talking to you about religion in local history. I think it's kind of although in Ireland I think we don't have a problem at all understanding the importance of religion in local history at all. Perhaps we might feel that there's too much religion in history and we could really do without it. I also think as well that in our modern era that religion has been sidelined so successfully by the media, by a more secularized culture, and I'll talk a bit more about this later on in the lecture, that I think it's getting more and more difficult for us to imagine a society where religion was hugely important, where religion sort of enveloped everybody in this big blanket, and where it sort of fundamentally shaped much of everyone's daily experience. So I think that if we're going to embark on a local history project of some kind, then we really need to be aware of religion and how it has functioned within society in the past, and so that's really what I'm hoping to do tonight. Like I said, you know, being a fundamental aspect of the past and being a way in which governments and other authority figures within society spoke about and organized society, it's really important then. The churches and operated, their geographical boundaries, for example, were used as measures of aspects like poor relief and things like this, of legal access, and so on and so forth. The churches themselves have acted as both official and unofficial government bodies for a whole range of activity. I'm thinking in the medieval and early modern times, church courts were hugely important places for settling disagreements between neighbors and others. And power was exercised by the churches, by church leaders, in conjunction with political leaders. So for all of these reasons that religion is important to understand. The other thing that I wanted to sort of just start off by saying was that although religious history or an interest in church history generates church records, and there is kind of a category of church records, my point is that, and as a historian of religion for almost all of my professional life, what has struck me is that you can find references to religion almost anywhere. So you don't have to look at a specific church record in order to be able to find an example of religious experience, to find an example of how a church is operated, or how someone actually believed about God and the afterlife. So what I hope that this lecture tonight will do is give you an idea of the real breadth and variety of source material which relates to religion, and to look specifically at 2 case studies about how you can use this diversity of source material, much of which you can find here in the Public Records Office, to construct a local history project of your own. So what I wanted to do first was that rather than just do a sources-based talk, I wanted to try and put those sources into a wider context and talk a bit about the bigger picture of religion and what we know as historians about the way religion has operated within Ireland over, say, like the last couple of 100 years. But before we even do that, I'm always banging on at my undergraduates at university about how it's important to really get your structure straight first before you do anything else. And I think as family historians, you'll be well aware of the fact that you need to know your wards if you want to find your maps. And you need to know your parish units if you want to find your baptismal registers. And it's exactly the same within church records too, is that you need to have an understanding of your religious structures before you can even begin to do your research. So I want to start off a bit by looking at the character of religion and what we're really talking about here when we talk about religious history. Looking at some of the structures of religion and how religion has organized itself within Ireland, by which point I mean really Christianity and really Protestantism and Catholicism. And then I want to talk a little bit about what historians have had to say about religion. And then what we'll do is we'll look at my 2 case studies. So in order to keep everybody listening, my case studies are going to unfortunately involve 2 Belfast examples, because I'm always being told that we need to try and have an all-province approach to this. But the research that I've been doing recently in religious history has tended to be quite Belfast-focused. So I want to look, first of all, at St. Enoch's Presbyterian Church in North Belfast as a little case study of a congregational history. And then I want to look at a woman called Jane Bell, who was the first policewoman in Belfast. So there, I guess, is a bit of your crime for free thrown in. Who was the first policewoman in Belfast, but she was also a deaconess, a Presbyterian deaconess. So again, I should probably use this opportunity to apologize for the overly Protestant bias to my paper tonight. And I really thought if I had more time, I would have tried to reflect the Catholic tradition more. But time didn't allow, and things. And my research is very much based around Ulster Protestantism. So unfortunately, that's what it's going to be tonight. But I hope it's interesting enough and with ideas enough to be applied across the board. So what I want to do is just ask everybody to take 10 seconds and think about what they think, and just do a little bit of word association about what you think about when you think about religion and local history together. So if you're embarking on a local history project or even a family history project, and you wanted to explore the religion dimension, what would be some of the words that you would begin to think about? Does anybody feel brave enough to kind of call them out?
Graveyards.
Graveyards, okay.
Parish.
Parish, unit, excellent. Come on, you can do better than that.
Marriage.
Records, marriages.
Youth organizations.
Youth organizations, excellent.
Ordinations.
Ordination, okay. Which might lead you on to think about clergy as a group, right? Youth organizations might take you to the Boys Brigade. Organizations in general might take you to, say, sodalities and fraternities, confraternities.
Social action.
Social action, okay, which might take you to schools, excellent.
Sunday schools.
Sunday schools, which are different, okay, which might take
social aspects around church.
social aspects, okay, like
Running up to the bingo in the church also.
okay, so the bingo in the church hall. know that sounds nuts, but you know what I thought about when I was free associating today? When I grew up, the church we went in, we always had potluck dinners. I don't know if that translates over here, where everybody just brought a dish. Well, everybody, the women brought a dish. Right? And we all shared that meal together. And I just remember endless queuing up around this table covered with a paper tablecloth. And it just, for some reason, that memory sticks in my head. Okay.
Teas, we call them,
You know.
basket teas.
Okay, basket teas, yeah, fantastic.
Imagine as well, you know, curtain and meeting, and churches were big. They were the clubs of the day. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, and so you have week clubs and things. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Now, I did some free association earlier on today, and these are just some of the things that I came up with. You know, just things that sort of popped into my head. I thought, you know, I have a couple of kids in mums and tots groups now. Again, the church basement idea. But then I tried to think a little bit more laterally too, and think about words like maybe like a sense of belonging. It's like an alternative community, maybe even a feeling of guilt because you've rejected your religious background, or that there had been a very domineering clergyman in your parish when you were growing up, or something like that. Again, I thought about Belfast and the open air preaching on Fridays at lunchtime out in front of City Hall. I thought of the Bible, obviously, as a text, and then that made me think of hymn books, and then that made me think about singing, and congregational singing, and so on and so forth. So, if we start to think about this, really, the whole idea of religion is hugely rich and diverse and varied. And each one of these, and each one of the subjects that you came up with there today would have made a perfect local study, or a subject for religious history. Now, back in the old days when the universities were the only ones in charge, really, of religious history and the writing of it, religious history was very ecclesiastical. So religious history and the histories that were written were all written about the churches, or the lives of the popes, and these other fascinating topics. And these topics were all very much driven by an elite and an institutional view of what religion was. Okay? Religion was the church. It was the structures of the church. It was the way the church was governed, and all of the politics that occurred in and around that. So it was a very limited view. Okay? You would get lots of biographies of bishops, or you would get a historical account of a church which only ever talked about the clergymen who were in charge and never about the people who actually attended. You would maybe get accounts then of how the church had interacted with or been influenced by, or influenced itself, national politics. And again, this has been a very strong tradition in the writing of Irish religious history, in that much of Catholic Church history, for example, very much looks at the way in which it interacts with Irish politics. Now, back in the 1960s, though, there was a bit of a revolution in the way historians began to look at the kind of religious history that could be done. And nowadays, historians like myself have a much broader view of what can count, okay? And really anything can count. So you could even write a history of religion which was looking at non-religion, or atheism, or secularism, if you will, or people who rejected faith, or people who actively sought to establish a new non-Christian type of a faith. So in this sense then, the history that we think about and that I think about when I'm embarking on a local study is the history of the ways in which people have experienced religion and they have thought about their personal beliefs. So one aspect of this, which is quite a strong aspect, is this notion of personal belief and how it's changed over time. It's the way in which people have expressed their religious attitudes. And one of the greatest ways, or one of the easiest ways of measuring religious belief is by church attendance. Okay? But as you've probably already thought about it, and if you do think about it, you'll realize that church attendance is probably not a very accurate way for historians to measure religious belief.